Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Ken Corley. On the 19th of September, many of us were in Dublin Castle at a conference that you had been instrumental in organising on mental health. And I, like many others there, sat listening to the various presentations and inputs. And one could be forgiven for thinking that in this country we had a service that was comprehensive, that was extensive, that was accessible for those who present with a mental health issue. And there is some progress being made, but I want to highlight an area where there is absolutely no progress being made, and that is the area of dual diagnosis, the coexistence of a substance misuse and a mental health issue for an individual. And the mental health issue could range from psychosis or bipolar to depression or an anxiety disorder. Now, I know it's not your area of expertise, Minister, but I hope by highlighting it today that you can have a conversation with the Minister for Health on this. Now, since the late 1990s, there has been discussion on this, on the demand and the need. And so in 2004, there was a report done by Eileen McGowan, DCU, and there were two particular findings, and one was that 76% of services failed in providing a specific service for those with dual diagnosis, and also a majority of the service providers, they agree that a fully integrated service will be the most effective management of dual diagnosis. But since then there has been little or no movement except a downward movement. Currently, mental health and addiction services are not able to treat people holistically because they're treating the condition and not the person. So addiction services will address the addiction, mental health services will address the mental health service. And yet, a recent report would indicate that 2/3 of those who died through suicide are people with both addiction and a mental health issue. Just 20 minutes ago, I took a phone call from somebody I know with this exact situation. Her brother has a psychotic condition, being seen by a psychiatrist, being given medication. Because that condition is not being adequately addressed, that young man has been turning to alcohol and other drugs to try and deal with the symptoms. His behaviour has become much more aggressive now, with the result his family are fearing for their safety. They've had to call the guards. He spent hours yesterday and today in a police station. He's currently in a police station waiting on an ambulance to take him to A&E, and I doubt very much that he's going to get the service that he needs in A&E. Now, you will tell me there's a review of Vision for Change, but this wasn't covered in a review in the Vision for Change in the first place, so there can't be a review. You could also tell me there's a new National Dual Diagnosis Service being set up under the HSE. My question is to ask you to ensure that there's going to be real collaboration between that service and those who are working in this area, those who are in addiction, because what they're hearing is that the model of care will be drawn up, then there will be a meeting. So this is like there's going to be a top-down, specialist-driven, consultant knows best approach, and it's not going to take into account those who are actively working in the area, those in addiction who have a voice themselves and can give their opinion. And it's not going to do this young man and his family any good unless that collaboration happens.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Deputy, I don't profess to be an expert in this area, and I thank you for acknowledging the limitations of what we can commit to here on the floor. But what I will say is that this was an issue that we put a lot of focus on about a year ago in the context of homelessness. In terms of the need for the state to intervene in a more comprehensive way to try to deal with both addiction and mental health in a way that was complementary, as opposed to a silo-based approach where you have two different approaches trying to deal with challenges that people face that are very much intertwined with each other. So if it would be helpful, I'll happily arrange a meeting with Minister Harris for you to actually talk to him in some detail in relation to your specific concerns and proposals in the context of what the HSE is doing in this area, in the context of a new national drug strategy, which has recently been published, and in the context of the review of Vision for Change. So there is a lot happening within government to try to grapple with this policy issue, and I suspect you have particular things that you want to raise in that context, and I'd happily try to facilitate that for you. But can I say that the increased funding that we have provided specifically around homeless services, recognising the multidisciplinary nature of the supports that the state needs to provide, I think has been a very clear recognition of some of the issues that you have been raising. And the funding again into next year for homeless services, which is increasing by about €18 million. Much of that support in the context of family transition hubs, for example, and the supports for families and individuals in emergency accommodation will be focused on that type of multidisciplinary approach that I think you're asking for.
And I mean, the collaboration and talking with those who are directly involved is absolutely vital, because there are unique factors and unique needs in Ireland with those who are in addiction. And we have made some progress in the North Inner City and supports for workers. In the West, for example, mental health services won't deal with somebody who is currently in addiction with a mental health service. And because there's no addiction services there, those people are left with absolutely nothing. I think there's also a need to look at the term dual diagnosis. It's an old psychiatric term from the United States, the 50s and 60s, but because we are saying that those in addiction, it's a health issue, it's a mental health issue. So, and the other part of the triangle is, of course, those who are in homeless. And the majority, so many people who are homeless are in addiction, and they're also presenting with a mental health issue. So it's this integrated service, it's people talking together, people collaborating, that will have the best outcome. And you know, I'm just struck, I mean, the people I'm talking about, they won't even get next or near a mortgage, tracker or otherwise, unless they get into recovery, and if they are in recovery they have their lives back and they can do those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that, and so I think the most useful thing to do is to make sure that you're fully plugged into what the government is doing in this area across different departments, but in particular led by the Minister for Health in the context of mental health services, and I'll ensure that there's a follow-up following the question today.
Thank you very much, Minister. Deputy Matty